very much, Mr. Speaker, and I am surprised that Paul Quinn took such a short call. I nearly wasn't ready to take my call. I thought, well, all is capable, but I actually find that Paul Quinn's usually got quite a bit to say, so it is a bit disappointing that that was such a short call. But I want to, in opening, Mr. Speaker, I just want to firstly recognise and talk about what Leanne Dalziel referred to before in her speech, and that is the diversity of our parliament, which very much, if we look at a decade or just a short decade ago, but certainly 2 decades ago even more so, how that our communities weren't reflected in this parliament. And whilst I acknowledge that some of the members are not necessarily sitting on our side of the House, but it is fair to say that this parliament now is far more representative of the diverse communities that we have in New Zealand. And I think it's also important to acknowledge our democracy. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, many MPs in this House, I don't know if Jerry Brownlee has, but many have assisted in elections in a number of other countries where democracy is not so open, it's not so accessible, and it's certainly not so safe. Go for a junket, says Mr. Browning. I find that a very flippant remark. And that member should be ashamed of himself. That's a very flippant thing to do. The ability, because this is actually what we have in New Zealand, is the ability for all New Zealanders to freely engage in elections without fear of retribution, and in some cases without fear of their lives. And I think we can all recall, Mr. Speaker, something that, whilst Mr. Brownlee might be flippant about it, certainly this side of the House aren't, that how empowering it was, how wonderful it was to see in South Africa the Indigenous people of South Africa when they attained their right to vote, and many voters who walked tens of kilometres in order to celebrate having that right. And so I think that that is something that we in New Zealand hold dear, and it is something that we should celebrate. I know that when I attend citizenship ceremonies, again, many new citizens from other countries find it very empowering, and one of the first things they say to me as to whether it's been as a new citizen or indeed when they've become a permanent resident, how great it is to be able to have the right to vote. It is indeed the right of all permanent residents, as long as they've lived here for the right amount of time, to vote in New Zealand. And it does sadden me when, Mr. Speaker, people don't always use that right. In fact, now that I'm out and about, or as we all are out and about in communities, we are finding many people who say that they didn't participate in this last election. They didn't participate, and indeed they are not happy with the outcome. We also, and I want to actually talk about some of the new initiatives, and we actually will acknowledge some of the agencies, in terms of and I do have it here, I'm referring to the 2009 New Zealand Awards, Effie Awards they're called. Show this to the House. Probably most members only received this a day or two ago. Now this is actually the awards for excellent advertising throughout New Zealand. Before, obviously, the True English. What was the latest ad? The Plain English. Before the Plain English airbrushed Bill English advertisement came on. Before that, this is the 2009. And in these awards, and I can see members of the House are probably on the other side are thinking, what has this got to do? We are. You are? Sorry, the members are? And I dare say Mr. Speaker is. Well, let me that I note in these awards, the Electoral Enrolment Award attained a silver award for Your Voting is Easy. We all remember the little orange man that was on our TV screens that encouraged people to vote, showed easy ways to vote, text all those sorts of things, and that won an award, Mr. Speaker, and I want to, in this House, I want to congratulate the Electoral Enrolment Centre, because they were the owners of that, in terms of making sure that those advertisements were on air. And I do hasten to add, now I know that Paul Quinn will find this absolutely extraordinary, but they achieved a higher award, or they were on par with a number of others, such as the Saatchi and Saatchi Irresistible to Men since 1889. If you do remember, that was around the D.B. Brewery's award with the woman and the blokes and all that sort of thing, which is more in Paul Quinn's line. No, it wasn't known as a TUI ad, it was the DB ad. But I want to say that in actually promoting a very serious subject to attain a silver award is quite an achievement. So well done to the Electoral Enrolment Centre. And just in returning to the purpose of the bill, it is actually, in doing so, recognising the Electoral Enrolment Centre, it is actually about establishing a new independent Crown entity. And I do congratulate the government, because this was, as David Parker said earlier in the House today, this was done in consultation with the Labor Party and indeed with other parties in the House, I would hope. And that is to ensure a smooth transition. And I have to say that in the Justice and Electoral Select Committee, and I will move on to Chester Borrows, who will be chairing it. I'll talk about that later in my speech. But I do know that all the three agencies, the Chief Electoral Officer, the Electoral Commission and the Chief Registrar of Electors, have actually come to the Select Committee, and certainly before the last election, and talked about a process to amalgamate the three agencies, in that it would deliver a far more user-friendly to be able to work through issues. And I actually, as I think Leanne Dalzell will say, it's not often we get the opportunity to do this, but I want to congratulate the government on this bill, because it does do that, and it does that in quite a sensible way, by initially doing, well, let me just go back. It does it in a sensible way by doing it in two stages. And I think that when it's been looked at in terms of amalgamating these three agencies, there is some complexity around it, and it's really important to do it in such a way that it doesn't disrupt democracy, and it does it in that at the end of the process we are going to have a transparent, effective, independent agency. I note that it will be called the Electoral Commission again, and that could create a little bit of confusion, but we can look at that in Select Committee, and I dare say there will be some submissions on that. But indeed, I think that in the first instance, by bringing together the electoral two of the agencies in the first year, is going to actually get some stability, and then the following year to bring the third agency in. And I think what we need to stress again, Mr. Speaker, is that this agency is independent, because, as I said before, democracy is something that we all celebrate in this country. It is something that it is a right, but indeed if we compare it with other countries not too far away from us, it is also a privilege that many citizens in other countries do not enjoy, and I think that is something that we should all hold dear. So I'm very happy, and we often aren't this happy in opposition, but to support this bill, and I look forward to it coming to the Justice and Electoral Select Committee, where I know that we will have excellent submissions, and I know that we will devote appropriate time to consider very carefully the bill, and that we will return some very good recommendations to this House. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.